Ansel Adams once said that a good photograph is about where you stand when you take it, about your position, about your perspective of the subject and the scene. Of course, there are many other things that affect the composition, like how low or how high the camera is, what focal length is that we are using, or the precise angle of the camera. And composition is just one of the many ingredients in the recipe to create good photographs. For example, timing, or when you stand where, is arguably even more important, as I explained in this video. Ansel knew all of this better than anyone, of course, but he still made a great point with this statement, with this quote. Sometimes a few inches to the left or a few inches to the right, a few inches lower, a few inches higher can make the whole difference between a mediocre photograph and a stunning image. I was reminded of this just a few days ago while photographing the beautiful Seal Canyons just out of my hometown. It's a stunning place, but it's one that is very challenging to photograph because the cliffs are so steep that you are limited to just a handful of viewpoints. The views are breathtaking from almost anywhere, but they are not quite perfect for photography. I find myself almost always wishing I could reach just a few feet farther, or that I could be a few feet higher to avoid obstacles in the foreground. That could be, after all, the difference between good and great. This is the way I felt when a couple of days ago I visited a viewpoint I hadn't been to in quite a while. The view was incredible, the atmosphere was beautiful with low-hanging clouds that added that drama that I like so much. Everything was perfect except for my location, for where I was standing. I made this photograph, and it was then when I thought about Ansel Adams and that quote of him, because there I was with a good photograph, but wishing I could be a little bit higher to avoid the trees and the rocks in the foreground. But they didn't bother me nearly as much as the river disappearing just for a little bit behind one of the cliffs. To me, that broke the continuity of the river, if that makes any sense. For whatever reason, I feel like that image was worse than it could have been if I had the freedom to be a little bit farther above the canyon. But of course, that wasn't possible. Or was it? Luckily, I had my drone with me. This is a device that I use mainly for video, but that I found useful for photography every once in a while. Because while it's true that the sensor in this thing is not nearly as good as the one in my main camera, and that I'm limited to a fixed aperture and to a fixed focal length, the one thing the drone gives me is the freedom to be almost anywhere I want. I'm not limited any longer by the very, very steep cliffs. I could finally reach farther above the canyon, and this is how I made this image, the one I wanted to make there. I was able to avoid all the obstacles that were in my way before, and I got a clearer view of the river as it flows through the canyon. And I didn't even have to fly the drone that far. It was maybe 100, 200 feet away, and I wasn't even higher than where I was. Now, this photograph was just an example. I don't want the takeaway from this video to be go out and buy a drone right now. That's not the point that I'm trying to make here. We should keep in mind that where we stand makes a huge difference when it comes to the final image, and that we should try, or at the very least consider, every possible angle that we have access to. Because an inch can make or break an image, so we need to try every possible angle, try different focal lengths, try different lenses, get low, get high, try everything you can until you find what you were looking for. Another thing you can try, but please be very careful, is what I did a few weeks ago. Well, I've done this a few times, but the last time it was a few weeks ago at the coast when I used my tripod to reach much higher than I could have by myself. And actually, this reminds me of Ansel Adams' very own rig. He had a car where he was able to stand on the roof of the car to access those angles, to be able to shoot from up there things that he was not able to capture from the ground level. And that's the thought for today. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.